My friends, welcome back to another Persona 5X Global Guide. We continue our series today talking about our main friend here, Morgana, and someone suggested I wear cat ears for this video. I looked, I couldn't find any, my daughter didn't have any, but peep the fit, we got back at. I'm gonna call that a good second place. So we're gonna get into it. We're gonna talk about Morgana, the kits, where they're useful, things of that nature. And before we get started, if you wouldn't mind a like and a sub on the video, it would help me tremendously. So with that, let us dive right in. So Morgana is what we call a sustainer, a support unit. And if I come in here, I can show you, let me find him. I can show you their little symbol here. And so this here is your, they call it salvation here. I'm sure it'll be a different name in global. But basically, this is you trying to heal people. So he's one of our healing units, which is interesting because it means that you're not necessarily going to build teams specifically around Morgana, unlike our DPSs that we've done in our last two guides. Additionally, Morgana is of the wind element, and they are, of course, resistant to wind attacks and weak to lightning attacks. And their kit is, I think, really based around helping you heal via off-turn healing as opposed to focusing more on direct healing like some other characters will do in this game. And then additionally applying a debuff against the enemies called Winded Status, which decreases their defense. So let's talk about them. Let's show you where these different skills come from. And what you don't see on here, kind of similar to Joker and On, is the icon you'll get in battle, but his is called Instinct. And basically the way that Instinct works is when you are in battle, if your colleague or your colleague, I'm just reading off the screen here, if one of the characters that's attacking is less than 70% health and he has a stack of this instinct, then he's going to do a follow-up, which is a heal. Now this is really important to know that it's a follow-up because it means that you don't necessarily have to use his churn for the sake of healing. So I don't have to use healing art, for example, when I want to heal. Doesn't mean I can't. I mean, there are situations where maybe you've just taken a ton of damage and you do need an additional heal, but ultimately you're going to get those follow-up heals pretty frequently, and there's some mechanics that work around that. So if we look at first the two passives, we start with this first passive. In this case, it's calling itself self-confidence, and what this is saying is that his heals can crit, and there's an additional 30% critical hit rate on the heals. So when you think about stats, that means if he has 70% crit and then you add in this 30, you've got a 100% chance to crit on these heals. Additionally, when you crit heal, you get a stronger heal based off of your attack power. So a big thing for Morgana and their healing is to get your crit rate pretty darn high. Our second passive just reduces SP consumption for your characters by the set amount over here. And that's really it for passives, but again, it's centering him around being a support unit and having better heals. So let's dive into the actual skills. There's some cool things to note here. So Gale Strike is a single target wind damage, and what it does is it has a chance to inflict a status called Winded. I know this says something else here, and that reduces defense for 2 turns. Super powerful. This stacks with your other defense debuffs. And so if you're running somebody with, say, Rakunda and their defense decreasing the enemy, or maybe you have a Rin on your team and she's doing her moves and decreasing defense, this will stack on top of that. So it's a good way to help debilitate the enemy further and further. Skill 2 is more of your traditional heal, but it also has a chance to dispel. And when you dispel, you get a stack of that instinct, which is what allows you to off-turn heal. And this additionally is based off of your attack power. So your heal is based off your attack power, and that will come to importance when we talk about how to build the character. And then our third skill is Miracle Punch. This says Gentle Punch, but it's definitely not gentle. And this one has an increased chance to crit, but at the expense of lesser hit rate. So basically sacrificing a bit of accuracy for a higher critical chance rate, which you'll see when we talk about the Ascensions or Awakenings, that can be mitigated if you get them all the way to A6, but not necessarily starting here advocating for you to go straight to A6 with Morgana. So it's a great move, and because it crits, it can help knock enemies down and put them in that mode where you can then do your all-out attack. So a really good move here. From a highlight standpoint, I really like this highlight, but I like it for a specific reason. And the reason I like it is because it does damage, but then it revives an ally. There's not that many places you're going to get revives in this game. Some are tied to awakenings, like I believe Miriam has one at her A6. I'd have to double check that. Quick cut edit there. You gotta love the magic of editing. I did double check it. It is her A6 that Miriam gives you a revive. But for him, it sits on his highlight. And so, your highlights recharge throughout the battle, so you've got a chance for this to come up more than once. And just having revive can save you on certain boss fights or harder fights. It's not that you use them like all the time or you should plan around them, but it's a nice piece of utility that you don't see in a ton of places within this game. So a really cool highlight. It definitely has its uses. That's the kit. As far as, if you want to think about a rotational type of thing, really you're going to focus mostly on skill 1 and skill 3. Skill 1, again, is going to put that winded status on enemies, which you want because it's going to be, decreasing their defense. And then skill 3 is going to give you a chance to crit, knock them down, and of course is also helping build that intuition. And he gains his intuition stacks by using different moves. So you're going to want to cycle back and forth across these things. Your skill 2, your heal, this is more of a, if you have a debuff that you really need to get off of somebody, or if you are just taking way too much damage and your off-turn healing is just not cutting it, then of course, throw your heal in there to kind of buff that up a bit, to give yourself some more health as you need it. But overall, you're going to be focusing mostly on skills 1 and skills 3. Let's dive into the awakenings. So again, as always, skill 0, this is everything that we've been talking about. So not much, else to cover here. On our awakening 1, this says basically that if your ally is below 50% health, then you heal for an additional 30% of your attack. Your second awakening, this is you'll see this a couple times, your ability to increase your combat skills by a couple of levels. Third, you have an additional amount of healing for whoever your main target selected was. So if you're thinking about, your heals in AoE, if I'm selecting, Joker, then Joker's going to get additional healing versus what everyone else is getting. So you're basically going to click on the person with the lowest health, cast your spell, they get a little bit of extra juice out of that one. Okay, Ascension 4, this again is giving you additional levels into certain skills. And then 5 is going to be our highlight, and this highlight is giving more health when it's used as a res. So instead of the default, I believe it's let me double check here, I think it's 20%. Yes, 20% of health. This is bringing that up to 60. So it just makes that res that much more, plus a little bit of extra bonus there, that 800. And our final awakening is pretty cool because on that miracle punch, it removes that hit rate decrease. So you're no longer having like an accuracy penalty for it. And then after you hit a crit, your damage is decreased by 15% for 2 turns. Ignore the fact that this has increased, it's actually the flip of that. So you're taking less damage. So overall, what do I think about the awakenings? I think they're good. They're not life-shattering good or anything of that, but getting that extra health on a res just makes that res that much more. And then for the Miracle Punch, getting that to be more reliable in hitting is, obviously great, but none of these are awakenings you would chase. You'll notice that I've got a couple, and that's just because I've pulled them on the standard banner multiple times. A lot of these characters are on standard banners. You're going to naturally get duplicates just from playing. And the longer you're in the game, the more likely you are to see more and more of these duplicates. So starting off with global with a smaller standard banner pool, your probabilities of catching these people are just that much greater. So I would not tell you to chase it, unless of course it's your favorite character and you just can't live without the A6, that's fine. Have your fun, of course, as always. But if you get these duplicates, they just give a little bit extra. They really kind of emphasize his healing until you get to that last, level, which is going to make your Miracle Punch that much better. From there, let's talk about weapons. So he has a couple. Now, this weapon here, this one you can get, I believe, from the weapon shop or just pulling it from, other banners. And it's a pretty basic one. I don't think you're really going to use this much. But if I go down, because I actually have mine, reformed one time, you're getting attack power increase after Morgana heals. And if the ally has 80% or more health, you gain an additional effect, which increases your health by a certain amount. I don't really think you're going to use this. And I say that because this paddle thing here, for lack of a better word, I don't know if that's actually like a paddle. It kind of reminds me of, I'm an old guy, some punishments when I was a kid. But this paddle, this is the one that you get from playing the game. I want to say maybe from one of the Persona 5 collaboration events. If not, it was a different mode. But they gave enough that you get to fully awaken it. And so just by comparison, you're just going to have a fully duped out, 4-star weapon, assuming it comes across the same, when this comes to global servers in a couple days. And so if you're on 4-star only, this is what you're going to be using. And for this one, it's really cool because first of all, it's going to increase your critical rate. Now at the base level, I think it's 5.9. Yeah, 5.9%. And then for the other effect here, when you're attacking an enemy, you're going to heal the ally with the lowest health by a small percentage. And you have a small chance to cause a forgotten status on the enemy. Now, the forgot status, it's a low enough chance that's not really something reliable that you can count on. It's nice when it happens, but you kind of just forget about it. It's just an after effect. But it is nice to get a little bit more healing throughput, and you're going to have, higher crit. And as we said, you want Morgana critting and crit healing specifically. The 5-star weapon, I would say, is not like the most crazy increase over the fully maxed out 4-star here. So if you look, we got crit 11%, crit 18%. So you do get a bit more crit rate at the base value, but not 20, 30, 40% or anything crazy. And then this one, it goes into a bit more of an offensive status. And so when you crit an enemy, you get a 10% additional damage based off of your max health. So it's pumping a little bit more damage. And because you're building him for crit, you are going to crit more frequently, especially, if you hit your miracle punch. So for the next two, when you use a healing skill, you'll heal the main target for a bit more. So just like we talked about with that other skill. And then if you use a skill to hit and you miss, you gain intuition. So if you're using Miracle Punch and it misses, you get an extra stack of that intuition anyways. So it's definitely a good weapon. It's a good utility weapon. When I think about the fact that you're going to get a selector for either his, Ann's, or Ryuji's weapon, through the beginner book, I believe, you're going to want to pick Ann's, honestly, if you don't have it already. I wouldn't put his over hers. But if you're in a situation where you've got a selector and you already have her weapon, his might be the next second place one to do. Or when you're pulling on the limited banner weapons, you get to pick 2 other ones as kind of consolation prizes. So not a terrible place to get it there either. If you really like the character and you want this little bit of extra ability. Plus, let's just be honest, that bling on that's a cool looking weapon. I love it. So not a must-have, definitely not a must-have. And I think just getting the extra crit in the 4-star is, certainly great, especially because you can max dupe it. But get it if you want it, not, required. Don't go chasing it or anything of that level. And if you have Ann, I would definitely prioritize her weapon over his every single day of the week. So that's the weapon. All right, so let's dive into our card sets. And Morgana's interesting because you have a few options here. So one of them is actually the lover set. Let me see if I have one to show you. But the lover set, it's up here, is your more healing focused set. And so the way that this one works is you get an increased healing effect when you have the 2-piece. And for the 4-piece, if you have somebody who's under 50% health, you heal them for a greater amount. So you can see the 23% there. And if you're using lovers, for your main card, you would use focus. And focus is, let me see if I can pull it up here. Focus is going to give you just better healing. So let's see, focus is this one. I have to remember the names off the top of my head. So if I pull this here, you're going to see focus and love. After landing a critical hit, the user's healing effect is increased by 28% for 2 rounds. And remember, Morgana is a critical hit healer. So this definitely synergizes well. And this is going to be your go-to choice for that more kind of sustainability build if you want to push him more into the healer category. Now another set, and this is a set I'm currently running, is the Departure and Sovereignty. And so for this, again, you're getting some good stats. You're getting HP is increased by 12%, which does help. And then when using a skill to attack an enemy, it will cause an additional 8% of its own health to the main target. So this here is focused more on relying on his attack, so his wind attack and the miracle punch. And then finally, when you use a skill to attack an enemy, your primary target's defense is decreased by 23% for 1 round. So again, if you're using those skills, you're getting the winded status, then you're also adding an additional defense down on that enemy, which is just enabling your damage more. So a really good set. It does synergize with him well. So another option you can run there. And then the final set is creation. So I've pulled one up here. And for creation, reconciliation being the 4-piece, It increases your speed, which this just helps you go before your DPS anyways. And then your max life, damage, and defense in battle are increased by 15%. Gives you a little bit more sustainability, gives you a little bit, more damage. And then for the top piece, let's get creation. So for creation and reconciliation, ignore this translation. It's saying that at the start of the battle, your character with the lowest speed gets an additional 12% attack. So basically, hopefully your DPS is your last to go, ergo they have the slowest speed and they're just stronger. So it's a good buff for your damage dealer. So really your card choices are coming down to, are you debilitating the monsters more? Are you giving that extra damage to a character? Or do you want to go into the lovers route and then give yourself better healing? It's not a wrong answer. Pick the one that makes the most sense for your team. Some people will even switch out card sets, for different situations, but you really can't go wrong with either of those three options. Now, as far as your main stats, and this is one of those few examples where I actually have the right main stats on my cards, but for Morgana, again, Sun is always HP, so just kind of live to learn and know that. For Moon, you want your healing bonus percent up. So this is called outgoing healing in this translation. It might be called something else in global. For Star, you want your critical rate percentage. And then for Moon, you want your HP percent up. So those are your big main stats that you want to focus on. You could also go with attack percent up here because, some of your healing scales off of attack, but either way is fine. It's going to be good for Morgana. And then for substats, as we noted, you want to get his crit as high as possible. Up to 70% at the max, because again, you get the 30% already within your skills. And so from that perspective, if you can get to 70%, then you're guaranteeing crit every single time. It may sometimes be hard because you're rolling with the randomness of whatever this gives you. And if you were to go through my cards, I'm not going to have crit, I think, on any or most of them. So, get what you can get. Don't worry about min-maxing these cards till late game. And honestly, if I was focusing on min-maxing cards, it probably would not be on Morgana anyways. But get your crit up. After that, attack percent up. So again, your heal scaling off attack, that becomes synergistic. Then you can kind of look at a couple things, either HP percent to keep buffing that stat up, or you would swap that over to like SP recovery type effects, because if you're trying to heal people and you're trying to run those skills, you may run lower on SP, especially in longer fights. And you really don't want your healer without SP. Same thing with like your big buffers. Like you do have a bit of SP management you have to worry about in this game in your long drawn out fights. So don't let him run out. But I think if you were to land a card and had one or the other, it's not really that big of a deal. So that's how I would handle the substats. Now let's jump into mental image. And for his, you want to first worry about your healing, your outgoing healing. So this is increasing your healing is what this is getting at. Over here, you're going into your increased attack. It says offense, but this is boosting your attack. So again, scaling heals off of attack. You see the pattern here. Then you can dive into your skills. So this is helping, for example, your miracle punch. Then you'd pop back over to your last skill, and this is going to be your highlight, and it's going to be your heal itself. So, regular attack skills, heal, and your highlight. So again, you're going to go for healing throughput. You're going to go for your attack, your other skills, and then your highlight / heal itself. And as always, pump these if you want to. This is just, flat stats. So, overall decent. I would say that versus, really rocking your top tier supports or your DPS units, you're probably going to focus your more rare mats on your DPS units and your, later on like your chords and stuff like that first. But there's nothing wrong if you love Morgana and you want to juice him up. That's just the order I would do it in. So that's it. That's the build. Now the big thing is teams. So we always talk about teams when we talk about DPS, but it's a little bit different when it comes to supports, because supports can more naturally move through different teams. And you're not going to build a team around your support. You build supports around your DPS. That said, Morgana is a wind element. And so if you're thinking about wind teams, like for example, if you had Fleuret down here, he's wind element, so he's naturally going to pair better with wind characters, especially if you're building what's called a mono team. Mono team being one specific element and everything is centered around that element. So they become like a natural pairing. He's also a really, really good 4-star. You can absolutely use him. And I would even recommend in a lot of cases to build him, especially early game when there's less units. But the thing to know with Morgana is when you bring him to your team, you're getting that off-turn healing. You're bringing him because you need sustain, or obviously because you like him. And you're getting abilities that decrease defense, particularly around that winded status. So again, I can't say pick Morgana and then put this person to help him or put that person to help him. It's really the other way around. Who is your DPS? How are you building a team to support them? You know, what personas are you bringing, etc. But just know that Morgana being sustained and being, you know, your healer, this is somebody that you can bring in so many different teams. The only place they're really going to struggle is if you're trying to bring them to add additional wind damage and it's wind resistant, but that's going to be the case with any, you know, wind damage dealer in that particular thing. That said, you can still use him because he's still giving you the heal, still giving you the sustain. And for, you know, quite a bit of time, Morgana was my main healer. I didn't really build Cattle up. I built Morgana up, and then later I got a different healer who's much better. But ultimately, you can bring them in content. They're a support unit. It's not like they're going to get shut down and they can't heal because something is wind resistant. That just doesn't work that way. So can't give you like a build this team, but know that you can slot Morgana in and out of so many different situations and teams when you need healing. If you're trying to rush a boss though, and you don't need sustain, I would say he's probably not bringing as much as other buffers or debuffers. So in those situations where you're not necessarily trying to heal, I wouldn't bring him. And I also wouldn't bring him with Ryuji. Ryuji works on having his health lower. And so if you're getting off-turn heals and you want to use Ryuji, you're probably making Ryuji less effective. And so I would not pair a healer with Ryuji. That's not exclusive to Morgana. That's just kind of the way of his kit. That's the other place I'd really have that caveat. But that's it. That is my guide to Morgana. Am I hoping to get Morgana? Yes, and I've had an internal struggle of after I pull Joker, if I haven't accidentally pulled, you know, either On or Morgana, who am I taking for my selector banner? And I think every night I flip-flop that decision because On, monstrous, definitely want to get her. Morgana, total fanboy, as I said. I've got my little, you know, thing right here. And I like them especially earlier in the game for my main healer, and I just love to pair him with Joker because I'm like that. So I don't know if I'm going to pick them from the selector or On. I'll make the decision in the moment, I'm sure, maybe even on stream. But tell me, are you looking forward to Morgana? Do you want to pull them? You know, and if not, why not? Is it just a character that doesn't appeal to you? You know, whatever have you. Let me know. I'm kind of curious. And with that, my friends, a like and a sub on your way out if you enjoyed this video and got value from the content. It would help me greatly. I'll see you in the next video, and take care of yourselves.